many of you felt that 7th grade was the best time of your childhood? I mean, if you could go back in time and relive any year of your life, how many people would pick, when I was 13 and in public junior high, that was the best time ever? Okay? Not many of you probably raised your hands. Why is that? Why is 7th grade so bad? Well, there's a simple reason for that. In 7th grade, children are mostly sociopaths, all right? Your conscience has not quite come online yet. Now, what do you mean by conscience? That's a good question. What makes up a human's conscience? Well, here's how it works. To start, your conscience is made up of the values that you've inherited from the people closest to you, okay? That's where your original, what you call conscience 1.0, that's where conscience 1.0 comes from. Traditionally, it's been from your parents, your extended family, the people with the most to contribute to your development. Now, some things have happened to impair the development of that, and we'll get to that later, but just right now, keep in mind, phase 1 of the development of your conscience is inherited from listening to and watching your family, okay? And today, that would include the influences around you, so school, entertainment, friends, those also play a role, in fact, a bigger role today than they have in the past, but let's just set that aside for now. Phase 2. When you hit around 14, 15, an important part of your conscience kicks in, and that is your ability to see things from other people's perspective, all right? Now, there are 2 areas of the brain that are involved, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the temporoparietal junction, okay? Those 2 areas, when they develop, what I mean by develop is myelination in the brain, goes from back to front. And so myelination is when you take those nerves that are stripped bare and you cover them with insulation called myelin. It's like putting the rubber on a wire, and when you put rubber, I'm trying to get a wire up here without pulling something out. It's not working out very well for me. Okay, here you go. All right, this is the power to my computer here. Okay, so yeah, it has rubber on it. That rubber allows the electrical signal to process efficiently and rapidly, okay? Well, the same way with the brain. When you're a baby, you've got all these unmyelinated fibers, and so coordination isn't very good yet, and so your brain works much more efficiently when those unmyelinated fibers get myelinated. And that's the way it is for the whole brain. It starts in the occipital cortex, the vision areas, and moves forward. So that the last thing that gets done, the last thing that finishes, is the prefrontal cortex. And that occurs somewhere around 24, 25 years old. Okay, so it goes from back to front. So anyway, the temporoparietal junction and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, when those are myelinated at around 14, 15, that's when your ability to do perspective taking, to see things from others' perspective, and to imagine what it's like to live through the eyes of someone else. Let's say you're reading a novel, and it gives you the idea to see things from the perspective of that character, or to do mental time travel, to go back in time when hearing a story and imagine what you would do if you were in that situation back here or maybe in the future. These things start to solidify at 14, 15 years old. And that is Conscience 2.0. It's built on Conscience 1.0, but Conscience 2.0 gives you the vantage point of saying, whoa, you know, if somebody said something like that to me, I don't think I'd like that very much. I can imagine that happening. I can see that if I were in your shoes, I might do the same things. And so that kind of gets you out of your own head and allows you to do intellectual empathy. Okay? Now, Conscience 3.0, the final version, okay? This occurs at late teens and early 20s. It depends on the person, okay? Depends on genetics and so forth. And that's when the last vestiges are done. The anterior prefrontal cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex, when those babies come online, now you have the ability to feel what other people feel. True empathy is the ability to actually, when somebody's telling you a sad story about something horrible that happened to them, to get tearful, to think about, oh man, I'm feeling it. I mean, you're telling me the story, and I know it's about you, but I'm feeling it. This is where you cry in movies or get really happy when a character gets ahead and you're on that person's side and you're seeing the book or the movie through their eyes and you're feeling it. So it's not just being able to intellectually put yourself in their shoes, you are able to feel you're feeling for them, okay? So, step one, intellectually, what is right and wrong based on developmental forces and influences such as your family. Phase two, the ability to do perspective taking, to intellectually put yourself in other people's shoes. And phase three, empathy, true empathy, the ability to feel what others are feeling, to inherit and say, wow, if that happened to me, that would be, not it would be really bad, but I'm actually feeling it as though it really did happen to me, okay? So conscience is a very important part of governing how we treat people. If you don't have a developed conscience, then you become capable of sociopathic behaviors. Like psychopath is a term we use for like mass murders and so forth, and so we don't use that term very much. Sociopath is just where you're just really, really, really selfish and do a lot of behaviors only thinking of how it affects you.
She won't care. Oh, are you kidding me?
My puzzle!
Hello. You, what? You puzzle. No, I didn't. Oh, sweetheart, calm down.
Stan's daughter.
Actually, calm down. I'm pretty sure I know what happened. When I left the house, I spotted an owl that was flying around, and he's the one who probably tore your puzzle apart. You know how owls they can't abide puzzles, sweetheart. They hate them. Pushes all their buttons. It's all over the nature channels. I tell you what you do if this would be any relief. Google owl puzzles. Yeah, that'll do the trick.
Okay? Now, when you're 13, you only have Conscience 1.0 online. And there are a lot of people, as you discovered in 7th grade, that have a really bad Conscience 1.0 based on how they treat their fellow students in 7th grade. That gives you an idea of just how bad Conscience 1.0 can be. And that is related to the culture that we're in. It really is. If you take, historically, children were not quite as sociopathic as they are now. And there are reasons for that, and that's a different talk, okay? But right now, just want to point out the inefficiencies of Conscience 1.0. Now imagine a world where people stopped growing when they hit 13 years old, and they were stuck at perpetually 13 years old. Now, if they stayed in children's body, it would be bad. It would be perpetually 7th grade for the rest of your life, and that would be horrible. But imagine that doesn't happen. Instead, imagine that everybody's brains stayed at 13, but their bodies continued to grow along with their hormones and everything else. What would that world look like? Is that a country, if you had a country where everybody, let's say there was a disease that came down, it came from the birds, right? And everybody got infected, and like within a year, everybody was involved, and so everybody's kids stopped maturing, their brains stopped maturing at 13 years old. What effect do you think that would have on the country? Think about that for a minute. Imagine, what would that look like if everybody walked around and their brains stopped maturing at 13? Would that be a pleasant place to live? So at 13, all you've got is Conscience 1.0. No Conscience 2.0, so the ability to see things from others' perspective, grossly impaired. And their ability to feel empathy, grossly impaired. What would you expect from that culture? We're about to find out. Would it surprise you if you've listened to my radio programs or some of my other YouTube videos? I've talked about the effects of marijuana many, many times, but I don't remember doing a directed presentation on YouTube specifically about the effects of marijuana on people under the age 25. Now I'm going to say something, and it's not controversial. We know that THC, a specific component of marijuana, blocks brain maturation. It's a known fact. It's not controversial. Okay? So, how does the brain mature?
Prenatally, the endocannabinoid system is involved in neural stem cell survival, proliferation, and migration of immature neurons. Endocannabinoid signaling also activates cascades that promote synapse formation, including neurite outgrowth, direction of axonal growth, and positioning of cortical GABA interneurons. The formation of synapses occurs at a furious rate until the age of 6. Then, during pubescence and adolescence, a period known as competitive elimination occurs, with extensive synaptic pruning and restructuring. In particular, adolescence is a critical time period for the pruning of asymmetric excitatory glutamate synapses and for the proliferation of GABA inhibitory circuits. An appropriate balance of excitatory inhibitory synapses is essential to proper late-stage brain maturation, and the endocannabinoid system seems to be involved in this process. Specifically, the endocannabinoid system regulates the inhibition of glutamate neurotransmission, which is important for synaptic pruning, influences the positioning of GABA interneurons, and is involved in white matter development. In fact, there is evidence for a correlation between CD1 receptor density in a certain brain region and its particular critical period.
The video that you just saw mentioned something called critical periods. In order to understand brain development that occurs through adolescence, you really need to understand what the term critical period means. Well, let me give you some examples. It's easier to give an example than to give a textbook definition of what critical period means. So, example number 1. When a baby mammal comes into the world, whether it's a baby horse or a baby cat or a baby dog or a baby human, those first few days are very important for the development of the visual tract, for the brain's ability to perceive visual information. It's very important that light be available. So, after birth, for those first few weeks, that is the critical period for the development of the visual system. If you were to take a puppy, a brand new baby puppy, and it's kind of a redundant baby puppy, I get it. Anyway, if you take a puppy right after birth and you blindfold it and you leave the blindfold on for like 3 weeks, what happens? When you remove the blindfold, that puppy will be blind for life. The visual cortex will fail to development. Why? Because the critical period, those first few weeks, were extremely important, and that light from coming in through the eyes was an essential factor in promoting the finishing of the visual cortex. So in order for those synapses to form properly so that you're able to turn visual stimuli into an image that your brain can see, the child or the baby absolutely requires visual stimuli. They need to be able to open their eyes and see things with their retinas in order for the visual cortex to proceed and mature and complete so that the baby can see for life. So the critical period is those first few weeks. Now, what if you were to take a baby cat, a kitten, and blindfolded it for a few weeks, and then you take the blindfold off and the kitten is blind? And you say, you know, that's terrible. I wish I hadn't done that. I don't want a blind cat. And so since light causes the visual pathway to complete, I'm going to take a really bright flashlight and shine it in the kitten's eyes for like 2 hours every day for the next 4 months. And that will force the visual cortex to complete like it's supposed to. It's too late. It won't work. No matter how bright your light is, you miss the critical period. The critical period was those first few weeks right after birth. And you missed it. Because you've missed it, no amount of light that you can give the kitten, no amount of light is going to overcome the damage that you've done because you missed the critical period. Eyeballs that are able to perceive light is absolutely necessary during the critical period in order for the visual pathway to complete and give you the gift of sight. Okay? In the same way, you might be aware of this, but ducks and geese, when they come out of their eggs, when they initially hatch, mother recognition occurs again during those first few hours to days. So when that goose comes out of the egg, the first being that is available, that is there, living and breathing, they're going to imprint on that being as mother. Now, whether that mother is a mother goose or a mother chicken or a mother human, that's going to be mother from now on. Okay? And so you'll see if it's a human and those geese have come out of their eggs and there you were in all your glory, they think you're mom now, and they'll follow you around like your mom. You have become their mother by virtue of the fact that you were there as an authority figure during the critical period. All right? Now, what if, again, you decide, you know what, I would like to have pet geese. I want them to follow me around like their mom. And you go up to a full-grown goose and say, here I am, follow me.
Get close to them. Get closer to him.
What do you think is going to happen? Yeah, you guessed right. The goose, if it doesn't attack you, is obviously not going to follow you. Why? Because you're too late. The critical period was days after hatching, and you missed the critical period. And so now, no matter how much you make yourself available, no matter how kind you are, that goose is not going to recognize you as mother because you miss the critical period. Your glorious body had to be present during the critical period in order for the imprinting to take place. So critical windows or critical periods are those times where external stimuli must be present at that time in order for, you're talking about the central nervous system, in order for that particular brain pathway to complete and give you the gift that it is supposed to. All right? Now, we're talking about neurodevelopment, and there's two big phases to neurodevelopment. You have the neurodevelopment phases that occur shortly after birth and in utero and all the things that have to occur in order for the child's brain to mature and give rise to a normal brain. But then you have a second neurodevelopmental boost that takes place in late childhood, say around 10, 11 years old, and occurs all the way up until adolescence. So what are the big changes that occur here to the brain? Well, there are three areas that if brain maturation works properly, these three areas will increase substantially, taking you from child brain to grown-up brain. Okay? And what are those three areas? Well, here we see in this particular slide the three areas. The first one, or the line on top, is working memory. Working memory. What is working memory? Well, quite simply, it's the amount of data that you can hold in your head at any one time. It's the amount of data you have to work with right now. Okay? Now, when you're a 10-year-old, you have a very small percentage of your ultimate working memory. So let's say 10%. And so you're talking, roughly, let's say that as a child, you have, around 250, maybe 500 gigabytes of working memory, okay? So there you go. Now, as you mature, as the years go by, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, as you move along chronologically through time, and your brain is getting plenty of nutrients, no harmful substances, then on its own, your working memory increases.
And the percentage of the adult brain, it gets higher and higher and higher in terms of your capacity. So let's say at 25, when this cake is all baked and ready to come out of the oven, your brain has a working memory of around 3 or 4 terabytes, from less than 500 terabytes at age 10 to 3 or 4 terabytes at age 25. Now, why do you need all them terabytes? What are you doing with all that memory, for crying out loud? You don't need all those terabytes to say welcome to Myers or welcome to McDonald's, right? Well, if you have a more detailed, involved job that requires mental manipulation, such as what you see with skilled trades, being electrician, a welder, operating heavy machinery, elevator repair, mason worker. I mean, there are lots of skilled labor jobs that, while they might not require a college education, they certainly required a really good working memory in order to do the jobs right, okay? That's what working memory is important for. You go from child brain to adult brain, and adult brain gives you the ability to build pyramids, all right? That's really important in the development of the brain. So it takes place. The maturational process that gives you that working memory is between the ages of 10 and 25. Now, there are some people that complete most of the process early, and by 20, I mean, they've got it made. They're ready for these skilled labor jobs, and some people take a little longer. But altogether, for most people, by 25, you've maxed out. Okay, so working memory, number 1. Number 2 is motivation. Motivation. I'm not listing these in any particular order because they're all important. Now, what is motivation? Motivation is your ability to say, you know what? I am motivated to do something right now for the benefit of my future. I'm going to make some sacrifices in my immediate future so that I can have benefits in my long-term future. So I am motivated to do something for a better life much later. So that means that I'm going to make choices like pursue a career, get involved in a painful training program that doesn't pay very much, so that ultimately I can get a job that pays a lot more. And so you take on training programs, you go to college, you do things like that. When you're 17, 18 years old, you start to think about that. You're motivated to make sacrifices so that you can get out of your parents' house and live on your own and have nice things. Maybe get married, have some kids, have a white picket fence, whatever, but you realize that for the lifestyle that you want, it's going to require a job that demands training, and you want to be ready for that. And so when you're 17, 18 years old, you make those sacrifices. Yeah, you go to college or you enroll in apprenticeships so that you can get the skills needed to have a better, more productive life later. Now, when you're 10 years old, how much motivation do you have? Well, think about it. Does a 10-year-old prepare for junior high? Do they sit around thinking, oh, you know, when I'm in 6th grade, I need to get ready. I'm only in 5th grade right now, and what do I need to prepare for this? I'm thinking about this every day. What do I have to do to make sure I'm going to be ready for 12 years old? You know, 10-year-olds don't worry about that stuff. They're thinking about right now. They're not motivated to make sacrifices for the future. It's all about now, immediate gratification. And it's the parents at this age that have to coax the kids to do things for their future. But the kids, yeah, you want to go to school? Do I want to? Really? You're giving me the choice? Forget that. I'm going to stay home, watch TV, and play video games. All right? Not a lot of motivation in children. But as they age and they have adequate nutrition, a stable, psychologically stable family setting, and not exposed to toxic substances that affect the brain, that motivation will improve all by itself as it matures, okay? And the last one, well, I mentioned, remember we just got there talking about working memory and then motivation. And the last big thing to mature is affective regulation, also called mood regulation. When you are a child and something bothers you a lot, when something makes you sad, you can't help yourself. You break down, you have a hissy fit, you cry, you get really angry and throw things and break things sometimes, all right? That's called affective dysregulation. Your emotional brain is really upset and you act out. You don't think about the consequences. You don't worry about who's looking at you. You just need to express your distress, right? But as you get older, your logical brain starts to kick in, and a good, solid, logical brain that's mature will exert influence over the emotional brain. And when your emotional brain overreacts to something, your logical brain does threat assessment on whatever it is that was bothering you and says, you know what? This isn't worth freaking out about. This is not a 10 out of 10 trauma. This is a 1 out of 10 because I can solve this problem by utilizing my time more wisely, by diverting some resources in this area, talking to a few people. This is not a big deal. I have logical recourse to reduce the severity of this problem. So I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to break down. I got this. All right? That's affective regulation. And as your brain matures, it gets better and better and better. So unlike your 10-year-old freaking out self, your 25-year-old self should be much more stoic and in control. So not that you're going to be Mr. Spock just because you turn 25, but again, your ability to regulate your mood internally improves with brain maturity. Now, what we saw from that video is the role that the endocannabinoid system plays in brain maturation. We didn't know about those endogenous cannabinoids for a long time. I mean, they're very recently discovered. I'm talking 1995, okay? And so for years, we didn't know what we were talking about when we discussed marijuana and the effects on the brain. We didn't have specifics. We didn't know what the natural ligand was. I mean, what is cannabis mimicking? What is THC mimicking? Well, two chemicals that are natural. They're produced by the hypothalamus. One is anandamide, and the other is 2-arachidonylglycerol. These are substances produced by your brain, produced by the hypothalamus, and they're involved in many systems. And they were mentioned in that video that we just saw, such as the reward system, the food reward system, immunity. It plays a lot of roles, okay? But I don't want to get into all of those because if we talk too much about all of the specifics, then your eyes glaze over and people stop watching and you don't get why it's so important that people under the age of 25 should not use THC. They should not be exposed to THC. And I specifically say THC as opposed to cannabis because, you know, marijuana is 500 chemicals. 500 chemicals, 100 of which are cannabinoids. And the two most significant are THC, delta-9 THC specifically, and cannabidiol, okay? I have no problems with cannabidiol. I've said that in my radio broadcast, and I'll say it over and over again. I have not seen any evidence that cannabidiol is bad for you. In fact, it has many positive things. I think clinically there are going to be a lot of uses for it, and I support the use of cannabidiol. THC, on the other hand, not a fan. Yeah, it's pretty toxic. Even if you're not 25 or under, you smoke, you know, a blunt a day or more, you lose about 1% of your hippocampus and amygdala per year. Now, that doesn't sound like much if you've only been smoking weed for a year. But if you've been smoking it for 10 years, you've lost 10% of your memory-forming capabilities. If you've been smoking it for 20 years, you've lost 20% of your memory-forming capabilities, okay? So, yeah, it's toxic no matter how old you are. THC is toxic, and CBD protects you from some of that toxic effect. The marijuana that's out there today is like, instead of a 3-to-1 ratio of THC to cannabidiol, it's like 80-to-1. And if you're smoking the skunk stuff, the really strong marijuana, the strong THC, it's like 95-to-1. And if you're vaping pure THC, well, what do you think? It's pure THC. There is no cannabidiol, no protection, and you have all the toxicity of THC and none of the stuff that mitigates the severity of that toxicity. Okay? So it's not safe. It is not natural. What you have is essentially genetically modified, and it does not appear in nature. And now it does, now because it's specifically designed to be that way, okay? Because people like the high. So it isn't natural. It isn't natural at all. So what happens if you're between the ages of 10 and 25 years old and you smoke a joint? How long is that THC floating around in your brain, impairing the maturation of your brain? About a month. It's an oil. Doesn't go away. It hangs out for about a month. So for that month, the maturation that would have taken place doesn't. So what I'm saying is that if you're a youngster and you're smoking marijuana even once or twice a month, you are blocking brain maturation for that month. Okay? Now, there's actually a study going on right now to validate this. That basically is based on animal models and what we know about the pathology that's involved with THC exposure. I mean, that's what we're observing, and that's what's logical. There's a study in play right now that won't be finished until 2025, done to confirm that very thing. But that in all likelihood, that is the case. So let's say you have somebody who's been smoking marijuana since they were 12 or 13 years old, and now they're 21. And now let's say they realize, oh no, man, this stuff's bad for my brain. I don't want to have poor working memory. I don't want to have poor motivation. I don't want to have bad mood regulation so that I'm freaking out and getting angry all the time and feeling extra sad. I want to stop that right now, so I'm giving it up. And you're 21 years old. Do you get that back? The answer is no. It's this age between 10 and 25 is a critical period. And it's like wearing a blindfold. During a critical period, you're going to be blind. And we're not talking about blindness in this neurodevelopmental thing. We are talking about lack of maturation. So your working memory, your motivation, and your mood regulation are that. If you started at 13, you're still 13 when you're 20, 21 years old. And you're still 13 when you're 31. Your brain is still 13 when you're 41. That's it. You missed the window. You're done. It's a critical period thing. And cannabis, THC, blocks brain maturation. Don't you ever wonder why, when you have these guys who've been smoking weed since they were in their early teens, and they're living in their mom's basement, and they're not even bothered by it, okay? They're like perfectly happy to stay down there, to watch cartoons, and play video games, get little odd jobs here and there, but they have no motivation to move out. Didn't you ever wonder what's up with that? Why didn't that used to exist? I'm telling you that one of the big reasons for this is lack of brain maturation. You're dealing with somebody with a grown-up body and a brain that is only matured to the early teens and not beyond. And so even if they give it up, you can't get it back. So what am I saying? Making marijuana legal, which is what the states are doing now all over the place, the perception is, hey, it's good for you. We got all these medicinal purposes. Well, what you're doing is that the more legal you make it, the more accessible it becomes to children. The more the perception is that it's not only okay, it's good for you. And you're blocking brain maturation. We're already dealing with the crisis in this country regarding skilled labor. The baby boomers are dying off. And right now, they're holding the country together. We need people to build our buildings, to repair our roads, to build our bridges, to operate heavy machinery, and to fix our pipes. Okay, we need doctors and all that kind of stuff too. But in order to do skilled labor jobs, the jobs that hold this country together and create an economy, in order to do that, people need working memory. Not child working memory, but grown-up working memory. And if the greater the percentage of the population that is using marijuana during these critical periods, the less likely that we are going to have adequate population to fill these skilled labor jobs. So if you ever seen the movie Idiocracy and you look at that future where people get dumber and dumber, the premise of the movie takes place, I mean, the setting of the movie is 500 years in the future, and you look out and, you know, all the buildings are put together in a crap way, things are leaning, the roads are in horrible shape, and there's garbage everywhere.
Where's your tattoo? Why come you don't have a tattoo?
God.
You're not unstandable, are you?
Oh my God.
Right? That's a kind of a joke, and I don't think that that's what we're looking at. I mean, I think that we're in some trouble with that many people using marijuana, and it's having its effects on poor brain maturation for a lot of people. So we're in trouble. But my concern is that we are going to require a lot of immigrants to come over here and take our skilled labor jobs while our population, our native population, our children become second-class citizens because they're going to be the poor. The Native Americans are going to be the poor people of the future because they're not going to be able to engage in jobs that have decent paychecks because they lack brain maturation, secondary to the toxic effects of cannabis when it's used before the age of 25. So I hope that I scared you a little bit, but I want you to, I'm scaring you with the truth. There, I mean, if you want to see references, I got some references here, but please look this up. It is very important that you understand. I mean, cannabis abuse causes all kinds of problems. It really does, even in people over the age of 25. But my biggest concern, my most significant concern is the effect that it has on our younger population. That critical period between 10 and 25 years old is so important, and it's sensitive to disruption from THC. So if you're having that discussion with your children or your grandchildren, I hope I've given you some ammunition to say no, to say this is why, to say, look, this is going to cost you. I mean, it's going to cost you literally millions of dollars in lost income. That's the difference between a job that says, welcome to McDonald's, and a job that is skilled, okay? That's millions of dollars in income. That's lost income, lost autonomy, lost satisfaction with your life, less fulfillment in your life, and more depression, anxiety, irritability, and distress. That's the difference here. So keep this in mind. I hope that it helps. Thank you for watching.
Where's your tattoo? Why come you don't have a tattoo?
God.
You're not unstandable, are you?